Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new video game movie adaptation, Borderlands. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So, movie adaptations of popular video games have notoriously been a tough nut for Hollywood to crack, although not for lack of trying. Really, for every breakout success story we get, like the Super Mario Bros. Movie, you just have a dozen duds or just movies that are not good at all. And this movie, directed by Eli Roth and kind of based on a beloved series of video games, is to me essentially Zack Snyder's Guardians of the Galaxy, a movie that does attempt to sort of meld the Guardians-esque, band of quirky roguelike characters with Snyder's more dour and gritty aesthetic. Unfortunately, there is no Snyder's cut on the horizon, to come and save the day and salvage this film, because this is not a good movie. I think despite being based on a first-person shooter video game, this adaptation misfires on almost every level imaginable. I think just devoid of likable characters, fun action, or even a sensible plot, Borderlands might be one of the worst movies of the year. And as a disclaimer, right from the start, I will say that, although I'm vaguely familiar with the existence of these video games, I have never personally played any of the Borderlands games. So I suspect that this movie is probably just, filled with a bunch of Easter eggs and nods and allusions to those games that diehard fans of the games are likely to discern and perhaps find more amusement and enjoyment in. And I hope so, because for all the non-game fans in the audience, really there's little else to appreciate, which is maybe a little surprising because on paper at least, this movie boasts just an all-star cast of actors and actresses featuring the Academy Award-winning Cate Blanchett, as well as Kevin Hart and Jack Black, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Ariana Greenblatt. And I think if nothing else works in this movie, such a talented cast should have been able to salvage this film. But the problem is that many of these stars just feel completely miscast in their respective roles. Blanchett, she's obviously a great actress, but she just doesn't pop as a believable hard-nosed bounty hunter. And even casting actor Kevin Hart in perhaps the most humorless character in the entire movie just feels like a very curious decision. And in one sense, I think I do appreciate just the outside the box, kind of against type roles in this film. And I think it is interesting to, for example, give a slightly older actress like Blanchett the opportunity to, lead an action film. But I think what made something like James Gunn's Guardian of the Galaxy movie so effective is that sort of those lovable rejects were just fun characters that audiences wanted to spend more time with and get to know. And kind of in contrast, outside of a few scattered, almost half-hearted attempts at, emotion or character development, Borderlands seems to operate on the assumption that audiences already care for these characters, and it does very little to, convince them why they should. I think if the Guardians characters felt more like, a close-knit family, the Borderlands crew more feels like just a collection of characters that were, joined together for the sake of the plot. Perhaps the one exception to that just so happens to be the only, non-human character in the group, and that is the robot named Claptrap, who is very unrecognizably voiced as Jack Black. And I do think that character does add some much needed charm and humor. And the characters themselves are just not a whole lot of fun to be around, but the adventure that they find themselves on may be even more joyless. They are set on almost a convoluted quest to find and kind of open some hidden vault containing alien technology and secrets, and in order to do so, they must track down various MacGuffins in the form of keys and the long lost descendant of an alien race. And maybe unsurprisingly, it does unfold largely like a video game, although if you're a gamer, it's probably more akin to the tedious kind of grinding fetch quest experience of gaming. Because there was just never a point in this adventure where I sat back and thought, oh, this is fun, I can't wait to see what happens next. Really, the plot merely kind of moves from one objective to the next, almost like checking off the requirements without offering much kind of engaging or immersive in the scenes themselves. And despite what is a relatively brisk, 1 hour, 40-minute runtime, this film just drags on and on. It feels like it's almost twice as long as it really is. And there was a point near the end of this film where the characters discover that they may not, in fact, need the third portion of this alien key to open the vault. They might only need the two. And I'll be honest, I felt a sense of relief as I realized that the story was quickening to its endgame. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, there's really not a whole lot, although there is a few things to be aware of. As far as language, that's probably where the most content comes from. I did not notice any F word in this movie, but there is a fairly heavy volume of just other profanities, mostly starting with the letter S, that are scattered all throughout this. For violence, as would be expected based on the source material of this video game, countless bad guys get killed in various ways through gunshot or explosion or smacked with blunt objects, or one scene where a bunch of them are almost, kind of burning in the sort of toxic waste acid. Although the action itself is mostly bloodless, kind of more implied, rather than graphically depicted on screen. And for sexuality, the only two things that come to mind is there is a scene kind of in a pub where several women are wearing, garments that are quite low cut. And then there's another scene where the robot character, it sort of kind of seemingly makes sexual gestures with his hands. As far as worldview themes, things going on beneath the surface of this film, Borderlands, it is not a deep film, but I do think it does contain at least some, distant echoes of biblical truth that Christians can affirm, because there is sort of this repeated refrain all throughout the film that gets spoken by several characters, where they say, "There is no salvation without sacrifice." And although it's never super clear how, it is sort of established throughout the film that the technology, the knowledge that is contained within this alien vault is said to, lead to the future salvation of the planet Pandora, which is where the film is set. The only problem is that the so-called daughter of Eniren, who is the last descendant of the alien race, is also required, to open this vault. And according to a prophecy, that person will be consumed and, perhaps killed in the process. And most of the characters appear willing to pay that sacrifice as long as it's someone else's life that is being sacrificed. And yet, it is sort of the willing sacrifice of one on behalf of others, particularly those that seem, unworthy of such a sacrifice, that is shown to be the most heroic. And there are some obvious parallels just to Christ's crucifixion, or at least to sort of the death rebirth stages in Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey. I think even more so as it's ultimately revealed that, this daughter of Eniren turns out to be some sort of deity figure. And in the Bible, in Hebrews 9:28, it says, "So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him." I think stories like Borderlands, and really any of the other ones that kind of contain that Christ figure motif, are just examples of how I think we implicitly understand that our salvation does kind of require a sacrifice from someone that is greater and beyond us. So in the end, obviously, as you can tell, this is just not a good movie. This is one of the worst ones that I've reviewed this year, which is, I think, too bad, because there are occasional, maybe distant, faded glimpses that hint towards why these video games may be so popular to those that play it. I think sort of that playful and almost cartoonish aesthetic that is set against an otherwise very grim and hostile world is an intriguing concept that I think could have been done a lot better. But Borderlands just kind of all throughout squanders its potential, and I think it's unlikely to inspire anyone to want to go experience those original games. But perhaps some of those diehard fans will enjoy seeing their beloved game, up on the big screen. But sadly to say, I think for everyone else, it already seems game over for a franchise that even just one film in already feels like it has worn out its welcome. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. If you have a more positive perspective on this film, or hey, if you love the games but were let down by what you saw on screen, either way, jump into the comment section, don't be shy. Let's have a conversation about this. If you have done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider. Got lots of movie reviews. We got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast. We do interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.